control, but of course there are fears because there is a lot of smoke.
The crowds in Cape Town overshadows the 2019 show. So that
Now, youth living with disabilities are among the most marginalized of the world's young people and are far more likely to face severe social and economic disparities compared to those without disabilities. For many young people with disabilities, isolation, exclusion and abuse, as well as lack of educational and economic opportunities, are daily experiences. But how can we better educate ourselves around these issues? That's the question we need to ask. Let's discuss this further with Chairperson of the NPO Disability Identity and Events, Sipho Rihlanvu, and Mental Health and Wellness Specialist, Molatelo Sefoloshi. Thank you very much for joining us here in studio on ENCA. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
And to your audience.
I am wondering, sir, how does the South African youth, disabled youth specifically, their access to resources and accessible infrastructure, how does it compare to the rest of the world? Are we still behind?
I think we're way behind the international trends. In many countries, even developing countries, do not have the challenges that we have in this country. And I believe that the reason why we lag behind so much is that persons with disabilities have been so quiet about their issues, burying their hands in the sense, and not worrying about challenging the status quo, because they've been socialized to believe that they are inferior citizens. So I think the fact that there's never been some kind of movement to mobilize around issues of access, issues of education, issues of economic development and so on, for young persons with disabilities, they have disadvantaged them. I think that there's more to be done, and on this day, it is the time that we should commit anew to look at what opportunities can be created for persons with disabilities.
Molatelo, on days like these, we always ask ourselves the question, is it that youth with disability, would they like their own event where there is access and all the resources that they need to be able to facilitate the event for them? Or is it that the main events, when it comes to Youth Day celebrations, for instance, needs to be accessible and needs to be inclusive?
What I've noticed is persons with disabilities, because they're used to not being put out there, they're always sitting in the cocoon. Even though there is somehow access, like yesterday we did host a beautiful event in Alexander, and we were happy that they were there, but we were expecting that, a lot of them could have been there for support, for them to get access, to be familiarized with the systems that they have, so that they can, have that access to everything that they need for their life to be easy.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it is that many youth with disabilities still prefer the cocoon, still prefer to rather stay home? What is it in our society that is not creating a conducive environment for them to flourish?
One, it's the stigma that the community still carries that makes them feel like they're different to everyone. And two, the trauma also that they've encountered as they grow in an environment where they feel that, they are limited to being themselves. So the trauma that they carry with themselves, it kills them. There's a lot of people that are with disabilities that can bring change, that can do so much in this world. But because they live in fear, they live in a space where they're just miserable, if I can just put it like that. And events like that was about, be the face of who you are, take ownership of who you are, and be out there and make a mark.
What's your take on it? How do we create an environment that makes it safe And when I say safe, I don't mean physically, I mean emotionally safe, because you were referring to the stigma and the trauma, to make it safe for people who are differently abled, young people who are differently abled, to come out and to bring their power and their intellect and their ideas to society.
I think what we need to do, and it begins with us as members of society, not to put disability as a death sentence, to say persons with disabilities are retired to the margins and that's where they should stay. I think we should reach out and meet them halfway and say, come with us, you are part of us, embrace them, welcome them into the fold. Yesterday there was this young lady who said that she prefers to be among persons with disabilities because that's where she feels safe. You know, we need to remove those barriers and welcome them back, because we have lost them. And we've lost them on our own accord because we chased them away and made them to feel so inferior that they remain so entrenched in themselves. We need to open up those boundaries with those proverbial sledgehammers and get them out of that space. Secondly, I think we need to change our attitudes towards persons with disabilities. They are human. They are not a sorry-sided shame factor. You know, there was this guy, as I was going around in my wheelchair doing my business, he just stopped and looked at me and came out to me and took out a roll of money. And out of that, set it aside and gave me 5 friends. I didn't need the 5 friends, but because he looked at me and saw me in my wheelchair, he felt sorry for me. I think those are the barriers that we've got to remove. We've got to say, we accept you as human beings that are worthy of our respect, of our recognition, and our attention. You are part of us. We do not shy away from having you as part of us. That's how we can change the attitude towards persons with disabilities and make them more safer to be around us.
I can't believe that we're still having this conversation as if we are at the beginning of the process, because we've been having this conversation for so many years, and it seems that we're not moving fast enough. Let me say that we're not moving fast enough. How do we get the process to be quicker? Is it government? Is it civil society? Who do you think? Is it people who are differently abled themselves? Who do you think needs to help us to move this forward?
I think we can have as many legislation as we could have around this, but if we don't change our attitudes towards how we interpret that legislation, how we implement that legislation, and who are the recipients of that legislation. You know, there's this slogan around disability, nothing for us without us. We've been talking about this for such a long time, but I believe that persons with disabilities, decisions have been made for them and about them, without them. We need to get them involved in these processes. If there are strategies to try and integrate and change attitudes towards disability, we need to have persons with disabilities driving that strategy, being part of that mass mobilization, so that we can find each other, because for now we are miles apart. We talk about these things on the 3rd of December, on International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We forget about it. Then we go back to our own activities of marginalizing each other, isolating each other, and looking at each other as if we are two different citizens in different countries. We need to bridge that gap and say, together, as a community, let's leave aside the legislation. We need to have this dialogue, very, very personal dialogue, come into each other's spaces and begin to talk disability as a way of finding cohesion in society.
And if we were to have such a dialogue, what would be some of the key points, like top 3 points that you think we need to address with urgency?
I think what we need to address with urgency is the issue of stigma, is the issue of empowerment of persons with disabilities. I'm talking about economic empowerment, and I'm talking about social empowerment, and I'm talking about educational empowerment. And thirdly, and most importantly, we need to bring families into the mix. They need to understand that having a child with a disability does not equate them being lesser parents than others. Yesterday we had parents who were so distraught, thinking that the world has forsaken them. We need to get the whole social fabric integrated into this dialogue.
Let's unpack that a little bit more, Molatelo. You are starting this by having those conversations at the Alexandra Youth Month Symposium that you had. We just heard that there were some parents who feel forsaken.
Yes, I think to answer your first question, policies are there. I think the government has tried to, include them, but it's the stigma in the community, us, how we still feel sorry for them, how we don't know how to receive them. I think that's what's it's delaying us to move forward. And yes, we still find those parents that are keeping their children in their households because they are ashamed that they are different. I mean, there was a parent that said, look, I couldn't go out. I couldn't accept my child for who they are because then I knew that the community was going to laugh at me. So I kept my child in the house for a very long time, but I realized that I'm failing my child. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done from parents, from birth, where we educate parents who have children with disabilities, how do they go about to empower the kids to also take ownership so that they can also have a confidence to go out there despite of, their disabilities and own it and say, this is who I am and I embrace myself for who I am. Like I am inspired with Sipho. Sipho came out, he's out there, he's loud, he's saying, let's all participate in this. Who would have thought, a gentleman, like mostly they are saying, I'm in my house, I'm hiding myself because I don't know what to do. People look at me like I'm different.
And now, with the forming of the Government of National Unity, what would your plea be to the GNU in as far as the empowerment, as you've spoken about, of disabled youth is concerned?
I think first and foremost we need to have political will to drive disability messaging. We need to call on the government to prioritize disability. Disability has been on the agenda, but it was not a priority. And I think the time has come that persons with disabilities, young persons with disabilities, need to stand up and say, please, government, listen, we've got these challenges. I think the priority should be to get the livelihoods of young persons with disability on the right track, economic empowerment, education, and so on. We are not looking forward to those stipends, those disability grants. We're not recipients of those. We want to do things on our own. We want to own our livelihoods. We want to get our dignity back. We don't want those, what do you call these stipends that you get, the 3,000 rands that you get from learnerships. People need to work. And they've got the agency, they've got the education, they've got the capacity, they've got the intellect. We need to start prioritizing that. My plea would be that government should look at that very strongly, because that has been lacking. We have the policies. We need the political will and what do you get this on the ground, the boots on the ground to drive those policies and give them effect.
Well, thank you so much for your time today here on ENCA to highlight some key issues. We are hoping that somebody heard you today and that there will be movement. Once again, congratulations on your successful Alexandra Youth Month Symposium. We will continue to see what will come out of that. That's the chairperson of NPO Disability, Identity and Events, Sipho Rihlanvu, and mental health and wellness specialist, Molatelo Sefoloshi. At 16:55, we're getting closer to 5 p.m. Stay with us. I'll be back at the top of the hour.
Political battleground for the upcoming general elections in 2020.
Understand, of course, that an undisclosed